Hi, everyone. I'm here today to talk to you about change management, particularly an application that I'm going to talk about in the advanced automation material handling world and the maintenance handling world. We'll get into a little bit how this change management theory can be applied in other cases. I'm Jamie Townsend. I'm the Senior Manager of Resident System Support here at Daifuku Intralogistics North America. My team handles local and residential expertise for software, operational, mechanical, electrical, inventory management support for some of these highly automated and complex advanced automated warehouse distribution sites. So the first three bullet points, we're going to get into the theory of change management. So why change management is good, understanding and kind of assessing when to engage change management, when you're executing a change, kind of like what are the best practices to plan for. And then lastly, I'll get into a demo and kind of give you a real world example of executing change management. Before we get into the theory, I did want to talk about how Daifuku, talk about the Daifuku environment, the life cycle of a site. And so when we talk about the change management application, it gives you kind of some context and some background of some of the things I'm going to talk about. So when we provide sites to customers, they're extremely automated and they're a holistic site. But they do go through life cycles. So there's three major phases in this life cycle that we support. After all of this automation equipment gets installed on a mechanical and electrical level, we have to make sure that all of the different disciplines and all of the different modules are integrated together. And so that's this commissioning phase where we'll have on-site resources ensure that, if you physically put a box on a conveyor, the software layer talks to the controls layer, the controls layer talks to the mechanical layer. And if a user presses a button and the load should go right at a certain location, does the box actually go right? So ensuring that all those processes are integrated together and preparing it for production, that's the commissioning phase. Towards the tail end of the commissioning phase, the customer starts getting involved with the testing. They're going to start bringing their users and their managers, start running some live orders. And this sort of gets us into the stabilization phase. So productive usage for the first time, really going through the flow and ensuring that, the building and all of the processing stays stable, definitely for days and weeks and months. But, the goal is absolutely stabilization for the years. Once you get into sort of months-long stabilization, we start looking at optimizing the site. So changing, doing small changes or potentially even large changes on a software or operational level, maybe even mechanical and a controls level change to really get the most throughput out of the building. So when we think about all of these different phases, the people that are invested in what's occurring, definitely during the commissioning phase, the Daifuku team and our management team, but also the customer and the customer's management team as they want to understand how our progress is going through commissioning. When we get to stabilization, the users in the building, the managers in the building, absolutely the customer and our management team, but also maybe the receivers of the warehouse. So like if you're ordering something online, that person that's receiving that product absolutely is invested in the change. Maybe the stores that are receiving the product from this automated warehouse are invested in the change. And then optimization long-term, right? Maybe this building now ships to an entire region, an entire section of a country. And so the people invested and what's occurring at these sites, it's a lot of people. And so when we think about change management, sometimes the conversation goes to, I'm going to engage change management because I want change to stop occurring, or I want change to occur. It's a little bit misleading because, especially for some of our large projects, which have anywhere upwards of, hundreds of individual contributors, but even on small changes, maybe, or small sites, I'm sorry, where there's, tens of people, change is absolutely occurring whether we want it to or not. So we don't necessarily engage change management as in to stop change from occurring. We engage change management because we want visibility to the change. So the question that we need to understand is how much visibility do we need to the changes that are occurring? In the application of Daifuku, we almost linearly need increased visibility to the changes that are occurring from left to right. So going from commissioning to stabilization to optimization, our expectation of visibility to change just increases. We also want to increase visibility to changes as we're going from one phase to another. So from commissioning to stabilization, and then from stabilization to optimization, we want to make sure the transition from those phases, any changes that are occurring, then we have visibility to. So again, that's why we start change management, because we want to understand, want to prepare, and want to communicate those changes out to a broad group. So absolutely any stakeholders on an executive level all the way down to individual contributor, we want them to be aware of changes that are occurring. Definitely don't do it in a vacuum. Make sure everyone's on board and has sign off before we move forward with it. Obviously, when you're doing change management, you're scheduling and ensuring it's happening at a coordinated time. And so the simple, let's mark it on the calendar and make sure everyone's aware of it. Let's make sure we have staffing for it. All of that gets easier with the formal process. But I want to kind of emphasize this third bullet point about stress, because I think there's lots of intangibles that we don't talk about when it comes to change. So we've certainly met those people that are agents of change. They thrive in a dynamic environment. They're always trying to optimize a process, or they're always trying to create a new process, and they love change and they're comfortable with it. And then we've also met the people on the opposite end who are change averse. They like things exactly how they are. They get a little bit anxious when change occurs. Those people exist on a vendor side, like a Daifuku side, for example, and those same kinds of people exist on a customer side. And they might even be in management positions. And then there's everyone in between that's trying to operate. Introducing a formalized change management process really simplifies all of those different kinds of personalities, all of that different kinds of angst and anxiety that comes with bringing all of those groups together, and sparks conversation, fosters ideas, really eases anxiety when it comes to introducing risk into a building. If you basically it creates an environment for great conversation, and that's why we like to do change management. This third bullet point, talking about solutions, we have absolutely noticed that when we have a formal process to talk about a change that's occurring, what results from that is not only a successful change, but holistic ideas that either increase our standards or spark another optimization or change that benefits the site. I'm going to give a quick example about a change that had low visibility, but if we had implemented change management, how it kind of fosters the good qualities of a resource that we want to see. So on a site, we were having an issue, and it was really confusing, and some of our experts even couldn't figure it out. We had a really dedicated guy who had been at the project from the beginning, and he said, hey, I know production's done, but I want to stay late after everyone leaves and really try to troubleshoot exactly what's happening here. On a management level, we said, absolutely, we support you. Let us know if you need anything. We're going to come back tomorrow, and then we'll reconnect. Of course, we came back the next day, and the functionality of the stations that he was working on had changed. Now, doing the change without letting anyone know, that of course is what we want to mitigate, right? And make sure we get visibility to the management groups and to the operators that are coming in. to the changed process and the changed equipment, but the ingenuity and the proactiveness of that resource to figure out a resolution, that's what we want to foster. And so a lot of times when we do this formalized change management, we're promoting that kind of good behavior or those kinds of good qualities. That resource even might talk to other disciplines, and it again sparks advancement in the ideas. So kind of some benefits of why change management is good. You might be thinking, okay, I'm sort of liking change management, and maybe you're asking yourself now, well, when do I start change management? So these are some of the things that, like the brainstorming ideas that we talk about when we're trying to understand in that project life cycle, or maybe in other applications, is now a good time to do change management, or maybe in 3 weeks, or maybe in 3 months should we do change management? This is not these are considered mutually exclusive, as in, you do not have to check yes on all 3 of these to do change management. It's also not all inclusive, so I'm sure there's definitely other contributors to when you should do change management, but this is generally what we consider. So yeah, do we have a stable environment? Again, as we're thinking about the 3 phases of the site, we're considering this question essentially at each one of the phases. If we are stable currently, then absolutely let's do change management. The stability is precious. We want to keep that. And change management ensures that any risk that we're going to introduce, we know about it and we keep that stable version throughout all of the life cycles. Maybe we're not stable right now, but we know the 3 steps that it'll take to get stable. In that case, we also will engage change management. The reason why is because, it's not 20 things, it's not an unknown number. We want to lock down and document exactly what we need to do to get stable and communicate that to everybody. Also, if there's an additional change that occurs, we want to understand the impact to those other steps that we had made, and if they impact them or if they risk them at all. If we have multiple disciplines contributing to something, and so it could be contributing to an area, it could be contributing to a flow. In the cases where there's multiple disciplines, we're going to engage change management. One of the things that we've noticed is, like, let's say a PLC controls engineer is thinking about fixing an issue. Generally, he does that with kind of like blinders on. He's thinking about his controls layer. He's going to make sure his controls layer works. When we engage formal change management, it sparks conversation and notifies other disciplines. Hey, this controls logic is going to change. Will that controls logic affect something I have going on in software? Will that affect something electrically? Maybe we need to provide more power. Having that formal change management process allows that conversation to work. Maybe it's not multiple disciplines, but maybe it's just a lot of contributors. So, if you have 20 people working just in software, that's potentially 20 changes that are occurring. So let's engage change management to make sure we understand all the minutia of the changes that are occurring. And then lastly, the change management, as we think of kind of like the benefit or the qualitative parts of change, is like, is the change to this critical area potentially going to risk the flow of an entire building? So for example, a lot of what Daifuku, how we design our holistic buildings is flow related. So I start at process A, I do an intermediate step at process B, and then I end at process C. If I'm doing a change to process B and we cannot bring that step B up, A cannot reach C at all, and now the flow is disconnected. And so if it's a critical area, we will absolutely engage change management, as well as if a change occurs that affects all 3, step A, step B, and step C, we'll absolutely do change management. And then lastly, formal change management has allowed us to have a very frank conversation about the outcomes of the change that we're going to do. So for example, yes, we know that we need to do this change because a problem is occurring, but can we officially say, and with clear language, say what the benefits of the change are and how we'll be able to tell the change? If if they say we're doing this fix, but we won't be able to tell if it works, maybe we don't introduce that risk because we can't tell if it's working. So we talked a little bit about the benefits, why we do change management. We talked about when to start change management. So you're like, okay, I'm going to do change management. You're at the point of execution. So let's kind of get through, you're about to execute. What are the best practices? So first and foremost, the one kind of obvious, definitely make a plan. I'll show you in a second how we sort of formalize the schedule and who is involved in doing the change, but it doesn't have to be any sort of specific way. Sometimes people put a schedule together, others have an email, but definitely plan for the change to occur. Please do not plan only for a good change. Of course, this never happens, wink, wink, but sometimes you might need to roll back in the case of mitigation. And so definitely plan a mitigation path for your change. I'm going to jump to the third bullet point because it talks a little bit about the mitigation plan. There should be a clear identification of who is making the determination. That now we're formally into the mitigation plan. We either needed to decide that we continue with this change and accept the risks, or we do not accept the risks and we roll back the change. These people should be identified when you're creating the plan. It should be known well ahead of time. Please do not make the decision makers like 20 people. It should be, generally we go with 5 or less. It doesn't have to be that, but something that's manageable, not like a whole group. And absolutely, please make them available while the change is occurring. So sometimes you might have to schedule a change out of production. So maybe like 2:30 a.m. when it's outside of production. It's never a fun time when the person that needs to say, yep, please continue with the change that's occurring is unreachable at 2:30 a.m. So if you're going to make identify a go or no go decision maker, please have them be available during the change. I'm going to jump to the fourth bullet point on the don't section. The determination to decide if you do move forward with your change or you do not move forward with your change should be very simple. You shouldn't have a go or no go decision that's realized, 3 days later. It should maybe take 30 minutes. It should maybe take an hour. Here are the constraints, how we're determining if the change was successful. Yes, no, okay, let's roll back and make it very quick. That's also why I know people sometimes get excited, right? Those agents of change get excited that a change is occurring and, oh, we're going to optimize this thing. And I've always waited for this optimization. If you can't get all of the steps of your plan in place, please don't rush your change plan. Push it a week, push it 2 weeks. I promise you'll realize the benefit of having everybody coordinated. Okay, so I talked about, the theories of change. Now I want to show you guys a little bit about how Daifuku executes a change. I'm going to show you documentation that an engineer will fill out when they're presenting a change to the management team. Okay, so now we're looking at what is called a change control document, or CCD for short. This is filled out by the engineer, the one that's going to be executing the change. And this is the document that we give to our internal management as well as to the customer management and customer operators, customers at the site, so they can understand the change that's occurring. I'm not going to get into the specifics or functionalities of QuickBase itself, because I know you guys are experts on that. I'm going to talk about just how we apply change management with using this document. So we have a status over here. If I drop this down, you can see the status of the CCD follows the status of a change. So some of these are pretty self-explanatory. Draft we use for when the engineer is just working on it. They might be making 1 to 20 edits, and we don't want those edits to notify anybody. So draft is, they can do what they need to inside this CCD. Once the engineer changes the status to pending internal approval, any changes that are made to the CCD are now broadcasted to stakeholders. They will get an email that has a link to the CCD, and the stakeholders can click on that link and view the CCD and ask the engineer if they have any questions. Pending customer approval, self-explanatory. That's where the management team of the change is coordinating with the customer, making sure the customer understands the change, understands the risk, and we're making sure that they're on board with the change. Approved and scheduled and completed, self-explanatory. We kept denied and withdrawn. We don't use quote in progress as much, but we kept denied and withdrawn kind of as lesson learned statuses. So if there's ever a change that we introduce, and denied generally means the customer thought about the change, didn't want to do the risk. Withdrawn means we thought we needed a change, but in the end realized that it wasn't applicable. Why did we introduce that change that the customer didn't accept? Why did we move forward with the change that did not become applicable? We kind of use those as lessons learned statuses. This change type is discipline related. You can select them individually or select multiple together. Sometimes we might have a change that requires multiple disciplines, or we might have a change that is just one individual discipline. In the case that it's the individual discipline, again, it's being broadcasted to the other disciplines to make sure that we're getting that involvement. Depending on which discipline you choose, it changes some of the fields below because you have to enter different kinds of information. So then we get into the priority. This is the priority of the installation of the change. So, obviously emergency, something needs to be changed immediately in the next couple of minutes, in the next hour. High and medium is, using your judgment, definitely important, but, it doesn't have to happen right this second. And low, generally, I would say we take anywhere from a month to a couple of months to do. Deployment, installation, start and duration and finish, all kind of self-explanatory. The reason why we have actual deployment versus this planned up top is because we schedule a change with the customer, but maybe later on the customer wants to adjust the timeline, and so we allow for the actual completion time. The stakeholders here is what I was mentioning earlier. This is who gets notified when this CCD document is ready for internal approval. So I want to jump down to this area, these next couple of areas. Again, pretty self-explanatory, but you are talking about the description of the issue and the change and how we're going to fix it. I want to point out this red text here. So we realized when we were doing change management that sometimes there might be information that our internal management and our internal teams desperately need to know to make sure the change is going okay, but maybe it has some proprietary or sensitive information, and so we don't necessarily want to share that with the customer. We added this customer-facing tab, which essentially, when populated, overwrites the internal information as we go to print the document. And so, here you're still providing the same information, but maybe you're, again, removing that proprietary information that can't be shared externally, but overall the same fields as in this section. I want to jump to perhaps the most important part of the change control document, the most important part of the CCD, which is how to verify the change worked and how to roll back the change. So when we when we're asking the engineers to write the verification process, again, if we cannot verify that the change worked, we are not going to approve the CCD. So if they write something very generic in here, we don't accept that. If they write something that we can't understand, we don't accept that. If they write something the customer can't understand, we don't accept that. This is, how do we know that the change worked? How do we know that introducing all this risk is worth it? That's why this verification section is here. And then this rollback section, equally just as important as verification. It's what do we do on a technical level to reverse the changes that we just made once we've determined that the risk is not worth it and we're on the path of the mitigation plan. The rollback steps here should be generic enough that any resource can roll back. You don't want something specific. And, you know, Jim, he's off on vacation and he can't be called, and now we don't know how to reverse this change. Trust me, it's a very scary time to do that. You want your rollback plan to be generic enough so that essentially anyone in your company can follow the mitigation plan and roll back the change. So at the point that the engineer is finished with entering all of his information into the CCD, he'll change the status to pending internal approval. Again, that's where anyone in the stakeholders will get notified. Once we have the internal approval, the management team of the CCD will start coordinating with the customer for the approval and the schedule and the ultimate execution. We have functionality which allows this button to appear only after the pending internal approval status is saved onto the CCD. The result of that is a PDF document that we can send to the customer that can be signed. That way, on a legal level, you know, you have the buy-in that says the customer okayed the change. So on a management level, when we're talking about executing changes, we use the Kanban board in our application to view program and portfolio level changes across all of our sites or all of our projects. What this great visibility gives you is a macro understanding of all of the changes that are occurring. So really quick, just want to explain the colors. The green is low, the yellow is medium, the light red is high, and then the bright red is emergency. The gray means they haven't entered in a status, and I might need to have a conversation with people. But what on a management level, what this allows us to do is really assess how our company is doing with change. You know, is there a product that we notice results in a lot of change, and maybe we need to have a design conversation about our product? Is there a single resource that's executing 5, 6, 7 changes in 1 week, and therefore we have even a resource problem? Is there a potential resource problem? Is there a CCD maybe that's hanging out in the pending customer approval status section? And, you know, maybe that's indicating that the customer feels the anxiety from a change, and on a management level, we need to have a conversation with them. This macro level view really helps us coordinate changes overall from site to site, but then also just high level within our company as well. So thank you for listening today and listening to me talk about change management. I think one of the reasons why we use QuickBase to help us with this change management process is because, first off, the malleability and flexibility of QuickBase allowed this application to be built quickly, but also the process can be used whether we have one customer that's engaging in change management, or we have 20, 30, 40, 100 customers that are engaging in change management. And so the process and the application in QuickBase overall is just extremely scalable. So thank you for listening today, and we're going to jump to questions. Also, hi, Mom.